5 o'clock's time to start the July 9th meeting of the Sherwood Planning Commission. If the secretary will call the roll.
Middleton.
Here.
Bruno.
Here.
Gillum.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Knight.
You've received a copy of the minutes of the June meeting. Are there any corrections?
Motion to approve.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Middleton. Bruno.
Aye.
Gillum.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye. You've also gotten a copy of the proposed agenda. Are there any additions that you wish to make to that? Hearing none, the agenda stands. First item of business, item number 5.
Final plat on Oakdale Estates 2, Thomas Engineering Agent.
Kevin?
Okay, good evening. In your report, you'll see that this is a zoning amendment at proposed Lot 1 for Rainbow Commercial Edition. You've seen this previously as a right-of-way plat.
You're on the wrong item.
Zoning amendment. My agenda has item number 5, zoning amendment at Lot 1.
Item number 5 is final plat for Oakdale Estate.
Yes. Oh my God.
The venue Oakdale Lot 1 from Half Street Improvement.
Go ahead.
I don't know that I have a staff report for the final plat of Oakdale Estates. Planning Commissioner? Not sure I have that item. It's titled as something else on a prior agenda because I have an old agenda.
Well, I only had one question on the copy that I received, and that was whether Hillbrook Drive should be included on this plat or on Oakdale Estates 3.
I don't know that I ever received information. Sorry if you have, then my apologies. I do not have a report for item 5 on the agenda that the commission has in front of it. Final plat Oakdale Estates 2 or 3, unless it's.
Has any other staff reviewed this? Richard?
I have been through these with the engineer of record on these, and we've reviewed them. John, can you help me out on remembering that since we don't have it up in front of us on 2 and 3?
You seen the copy?
This plat is on Oakdale Estates Phase 2 and Phase 3. They're adjacent to Oakdale on the north side. These are kind of larger estate type lots, probably 100 feet to 120 feet wide and 200 feet deep. These are not a whole lot of development that needs to be done with these lots because they front on Oakdale Drive, and Oakdale Drive is already in. Right now we're in the process of under construction, and we're going to put sidewalks in along Oakdale on the frontage of these lots, and we're going to put some sewer in along the back and some drainage along the sides. And that's what these lots are for. We're going to plat them now before the construction is done so that builders can start building. He has some lots already sold. The developer has posted a escrow account for both of these. He has all of them under contract. And he has escrowed the contract amount for both phase 2 and phase 3, and put that up with Beach. And I believe,
And I've received
a copy of that.
I've received those and reviewed those.
So that's what we're asking for, is to approve the plat kind of ahead of construction so that the builders get a little head start on these because there are larger lots. And your question about the Hillbrook Drive, that street was put in within phase 4 of Oakdale, or of Miller's Glen. That's under construction also. And it's being cleared now. You can go out and see it's being cleared, but not really part of this development.
So it is part of another plat?
Part of another plat, and it's under construction now, so it will be shortly put in, but not as part of this plat.
We've been in discussions about this on particular Oakdale Estates 2 and Oakdale Estates 3 on moving ahead with the sale of the lots and having the funds deposited, and we are on record. I have records of those in my office that we can accept that according to our subdivision development rules.
So that is approvable.
Yes, it is.
So what about what looks to be right away of Miller Valley Drive there on Oakdale Estates 2? It's right away up to the back of a lot of Miller Glen.
Oakdale 3.
No, it's on 2.
Meadow Valley Drive?
Yes, sir.
Yes, that will be part of the construction in Oakdale Estates Phase 2. That's part of the bond.
But I guess my concern is, are we going to create this no man's land that the city hasn't maintained between two houses back up to the rear of somebody else's?
And what we have there is
Or you're going to build a road to somebody's?
right. We have a turnaround there. We'll have a hammerhead turnaround type, so that cars and trucks can turn.
Okay. Oh, Miller Valley Drive's not going to go all the way to Oakdale.
No, it does not go to Oakdale.
Are you okay with that? I mean,
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we need a motion on Oakdale Estates 2.
Motion to approve the final plat.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Middleton,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Next item is final plat on Oakdale Estates 3. You with that too?
Yes, sir. The same comments on that as I had on Page 2.
Yeah, you answered my one question. Okay. You do? All right. Motion to approve the final plat on Oakdale Estates Phase 3.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Middleton,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is item number 7.
A zoning amendment at Lot 1 Rainbow Commercial Edition from R1 C3 and Butler Agent.
Kevin?
See on your graphic on your screen as well as in your report, it's at 14100 block of Highway 107. Parcel in question right now is actually split zoned. There's a portion of it that is R1. There's also another portion of it that is C3. There are 2 parcels of record associated with site plan that they're also going to be at later on in this particular portion of the subject parcel. There's roughly 0.75 acres, and that portion is currently zoned R1. The applicant is requesting C.
When this came in, who was the owner of record requesting the amendment?
The applicant. representation.
Who?
It's 107 dash 10.3 LLC.
That who made the application?
That's the same entity that made the application.
The applicant's representative as far as staff, Mr. Butler, the surveyor, is one of the submitting all the paperwork. They may have signed off on it, but that was the owner of records applicant.
Okay, this requires a public hearing. I'll call the public hearing open. Does anybody wish to make a comment on this request to change the zoning classification on this parcel? Hearing none, I call the public hearing closed. I guess my only question is why on the larger subdivision, which is the commercial subdivision, much of which is zoned R1, why didn't you go ahead and request C3 on that?
Request is remainder of the one, it looks like 149 was the total acreage for the site plan. Also, 1.4 acres was the ultimate need for the project, with 0.75 of that not having requisite zoning.
There's a clear understanding that should that rest of that subdivision be developed, there's going to be some more rezoning.
Our engineer, Jim Butler, could not be here today. It was my opinion that of the 10.2 acres of the total site, there were two small parcels that were R1. And so that's what we came in to request the zoning be changed to, was on the two smaller sites. So correct me if I'm wrong. I would thought after tonight's meeting, if you approved it, then the entire 10.2 acres would be appropriately zoned C3.
That is not what we were provided with these site plans from 1.49 acres. It had a little bit of right of way that we also started to survey out to be sure about the dedication. So we had three legal descriptions. We had a legal description for 1.49. We had another legal description for that right of way dedication. And then the residual was its own legal description. The site plan was supposed to be so we're talking 1.49, which is needed to have C3 zone. Only approximately half of that has C3 zoning. So the request has been associated with site plans. There's never been any plans submitted for the residue, nor any proposed redevelopment.
But what is the residue? I thought it was, majority of it was C3 already.
No, sir. You can see on the graphic here, up on the screen, the majority of the acres is actually on R1. Cyan and light blue colors, the entire parcel. You've got roughly 7.11 acres of that zone R1, with 2.55 acres zone C3.
Mr. Chairman, you're correct then. We will have to come back and make another request. We were of the opinion that we're requesting all of it, of the 10.2 to be rezoned, and evidently we've only done the 1.49, which is our immediate need. So we will have to come back and do that.
The survey that was submitted with this rezoning did include a survey out of the entire area. There was never formally requested that entire area going to C3. They did make a survey that would insinuate that, but there was never anything.
This is all just a bit awkward because in effect, we are rezoning not the entire proposed commercial subdivision, but the first lot of it.
Right. That was not our intent by any means. We thought we attached the proper legal, but if that's what's being considered, y'all were kind enough to consider the preliminary plat subject to this rezoning for our specific user. So we will, see fit to rezone this. We'll come back at a later date for the balance.
Well, you did precisely what you were asked to do.
Well,
precisely.
Staff, of course, provide the graphic that it has now in a future report. I've been able to access it. Wouldn't necessarily change the request.
Just a minute here. Got a letter, this is to the city of Sherwood from Jim Butler, professional land surveyor. So this is a formal request by Highway 107 10.3, owner 5317 JFK Boulevard, North Little Rock, to change the zoning on 10.21 acres, more or less, located at Highway 14177, Highway 107, from R1 to C3.
And submitted only proceedings on it because we reviewed from a site plan perspective before the zoning was changed. I think that's never saw any plans associated with it.
You know, he did submit a legal.
Well, he submitted a plat of 10.21 acres here.
As part of the application.
Yeah, which goes.
And it's at the end of the report too.
So
you can consider it. The report doesn't read that. You can consider the full acreage.
My sense is that because the intended use is for commercial, and the plan, as far as I can see, is intended for commercial, it would be appropriate to zone the entire property commercial, and we can do that. There's some question about whether the application was complete and clear.
But it's pretty
Well,
clear.
The cover letter is clear enough. It is staff's responsibility to make sure that we compound the prior requests. But the land use map wouldn't necessarily be at odds with the entirety.
So the issue before us is whether we elect to recommend rezoning the entire 10.49 acres to C3. Is there any discussion?
That's what the owner asked for.
The future land use map has conservation, like that's what sits in that's not. There's environmental constraints. So it's not as without specific
The zoning would be clear, but the site plan might not be.
Let's do a motion to approve it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve recommending the 10.49 acres to be rezoned to C3 to the city council. Call roll.
Middleton,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Dillon,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Next item. 8.
Plat plan of lot 1, Rainbow Commercial Edition.
very much related to the last item we reviewed. We have a 1.49 acre parcel that would come in for site plan review, developed as a commercial use, essentially a fuel service station with related convenience retail and a 5-pump fuel canopy. Purple hatch line in relation to parcel shown, roughly 1 acres. And of course, you can see the site plan entirety, respect to the entire site. Note that the right-of-way dedication that you guys have on your full-size plans is shown on this SNP, but there will be a separate legal description for dedicated right-of-way, not necessarily to be made time, but simply separate from the rest of the 1.49 acres.
Are there any staff concerns?
Not at this time. Ingress egress doesn't look to be at odds with any of the circulation. There does seem to be effort loading and unloading. They do show dumpster enclosures. They do overpark it. More parking would otherwise be requires, and the ADA van accessibility is right up front, with dedicated striping. The only issue at this time would be for permits, how the right of way.
Since this is a site plan, this requires a public hearing. I'm opening the public hearing. Does anybody wish to comment on this proposed site plan? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Gentlemen?
Motion to approve the site plan.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve.
Middleton?
Aye.
Bruno?
Aye.
Gillum?
Aye.
Next item, 9.
Preliminary plat of lot 1 and 2, Eddie Edition, half of parlor 8.
So this went through a couple of iterations before it reached its conclusion tonight. Any addition is how the plat was originally proposed because it was an unplatted portion of the Miller Cove subdivision south. But as time has gone on and we've gone through several iterations, the applicant, the original proposal of having 2 lots has now become ultimately extension.
Hold it. This is number 9. This is the Rainbow, final plat for Rainbow Edition.
Yep.
That's my fault. I had an old agenda.
Yes.
Start all over.
Yes.
Sorry, my fault. Number 9, final plat of lot 1, Rainbow Commercial Edition, Jim Butler surveying.
Okay. I don't necessarily have a report for that item on my list because that was not on my previous.
But just a moment.
Perhaps we should ask Commissioner Lucian, who has a copy of it.
Makes it a lot easier.
Do you mind if I compare yours to mine, just to be sure I've got the right one? Because I've got it in another form.
Chairman, could I make another comment on the final plat? Go ahead. If we were to submit that, and once the city council was to approve the final zoning, which y'all voted on this evening, and we were going to request that the preliminary plat that you approve be signed as final plat, and we were going to place the appropriate bond or letter of credit with Richard.
Right.
So we're requesting that the plat be signed after city council approves it, and we put up the adequate bond for anything that Richard asked for us to do. So I just want to clarify, we're not asking for the plat to be signed tonight. It would be after the next city council meeting, and that we put an adequate bond up that is pleased with.
And that is part of our regulations. It allows for that to happen. I was just confirming on this one, we had previous discussions on this site plan of whether or not the road dedication was in there or not. And on this one, we have the legal description of the Rainbow 50-foot right-of-way. But the part that's shown as Lot 1 is not including that, obviously, and that's delineated correctly here. in the discussions that we had on the completion of that cul-de-sac, that the design will be there, that the road will be built to the standards, but you'll be leaving that bond there to complete that. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's the way this is.
That's
Yeah.
how we'll put the bond up according to what
Right. You know, that was our concern earlier, was just the road construction, and this is something for the planning commission to consider, because the discussions we've had in the previous meeting and in our staff meetings has been over whether or not we want to accept this road, because it doesn't really lead anywhere today. It is there coming off of Highway 107, Rainbow Drive. It's available for the future construction. It does serve this lot 1, but and it's necessary for their flow of traffic, as I understand it, that they need this connection, but they don't have to have the cul-de-sac part of it. And whether this is broken into, if it's the remaining 8.26 acres is sold for one development, or whether it is further subdivided, is going to drive that construction of the cul-de-sac and actually its exact final placement.
So until the remainder is platted, sounds like the best solution is leave the roadway portion undedicated.
That
Just
has
final
been,
plat, the lot.
right.
The lot.
That is what we have discussed earlier on this, was whether or not accepting the road right-of-way dedication with lot 1 is really what we want to do, or do we want to just accept the lot 1 as the site plan, and the right-of-way is there, they will be making their construction. It's part of a preliminary plat, but as far as the final plat, to move ahead with the construction, that this is just for that, and the bond is there to complete the construction, but then the final plat for the right-of-way for the road would be on a future submittal. Okay.
Which would
Does
make
that
sense to me, because at this point, we really don't know what else is going to happen on that property, and we could, in effect, be dedicating a private street.
That is correct.
So lot 1.
Right. Right. So I think that the best thing to do is to not be final platting the right-of-way, but we are final platting the lot so that they can move ahead.
Are you saying the legal includes that right-of-way?
He has it here listed. But his legals are for everything, and his request. Where is that? The agenda. That's just for lot 1.
It is just for lot 1. Lot
Right.
1 was described separately.
Site plan of lot 1. So,
The final plat of lot 1.
excuse me. Final plat of lot 1. That's correct. Final plat, lot 1, Rainbow Commercial Edition. Yes. So
So I'm confused. Are you telling me that the legal description includes more than lot 1?
the legals for this entire 10 plus acres are on the side of this, but the part that we would be, what he's asking to be platted out of this total is this lot 1, and we have a legal description for lot 1.
Would that create confusion? I don't know what the legal ramifications are of having a legal description that doesn't match the drawing.
Well, I mean, the final plat, it says clearly here, lot 1, Rainbow Commercial, and that's phase 1. And he includes here, and the dedication of Rainbow Drive. Those are the only 2 things, but what I'm recommending is we not be dedicating Rainbow Drive, that we just go with the lot 1.
Agreed.
And it seems to me that what we ought to be approving is the plat minus the dedication and the legal to anything but lot 1.
Yeah.
Agreed. Right. So your drawing still stands as an accurate document, and it accurately describes lot 1.
But with a couple of things taken off to be accurate.
As a final plat, yes. As a preliminary plat, it could stay, but as a final plat, yes.
I think we approved the preliminary plat last month.
We did.
The final plat just needs to be clean.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm a little confused. Help me. Lot 1 is the 1.49 acres.
Correct.
And we are trying to put up the bond for and dedicate the right-of-way for Rainbow Lane. We are going to do all the improvements to Rainbow Lane except for cul-de-sac portion. When we come, so everything but the cul-de-sac would be dedicated to the city. And if you approve what we submitted, I'm asking, not telling.
No, that's what we're talking about leaving
That's
off.
not the way it's written.
Yeah, so
Final plat the lot.
we definitely wanted to dedicate the road to the city. That we have the bonds up to maintain it and all that,
But here's the concern. Until you final plat the remainder of the subdivision, if you dedicate the road, you more or less have made a public driveway potentially to a large lot. And that's what we're trying to avoid.
so when I come back into plat it later, then we
can dedicate the right of way later.
I'm
Once we
fine
send,
with that.
all we're going to final plat is the lot itself. Whether you build the road.
Dedicated, we build the road, it's private. We plat something.
Okay, gentlemen, what's your pleasure on this?
I say motion to approve lot 1 without the dedicated road.
Agreed. Second.
Legals.
We have a motion and a second to approve the final plat, subject to A, the city council passing the rezone.
Right.
B, that it doesn't include the dedication of a street to the city at this time, and 4, that the legal description bears only to lot 1. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Call the roll.
Middleton,
Aye.
Aye.
Dillon,
Aye.
Aye.
Next item, number 10.
preliminary plat of lot 1 and 2, and addition draft map Marlowe.
So as I began before, this project was seen by staff initially as replatting of Eddy Addition. This is a portion of land that is not inside the Miller Cove subdivision south. But through several iterations of the project engineer and designer, this is ultimately gone as an extension, if you will, to lots 1, 2, 3 of Miller Cove to the south. So the title of this is actually preliminary plat lots 1 through 3 Miller Cove edition. That's how the plat works. This is a preliminary plat. You can see here that this is just a graphic that's available for anyone's public access. You can see that the subject property was originally unplatted. Sometimes you see these lots as residue or bulk parcels. Here it was literally unplatted, just what was left over. But you can see those existing lots 1, 2, 3, and 4 being south properties that are going to be essentially enveloping portions of this are lots 1, 2, 3 off of the rural drive. And so this was the original PRC item. As you can see, this was lot 1 and lot 2 Eddy Addition. You can see how that's sort of superimposed on our property lines. You can see how that was going to be an extension of really lots, I think that was lot 3 and lot 2. Other one. You would have run into situations of lot depth, area requirements. A lot of those weren't going to necessarily buildable form. So through discussions with the applicant's surveyor and engineer, this was what was to essentially have lot 1R, lot 2R, and lot 3R at 0.33, 0.42, 0.42, respectively. Essentially remove that rear lot line of the lots that are off of Hill Roll Drive, simply become larger lots. So this was second review. after staff had gone through and asked them to do a little bit of cleanup on this, they did address those on a plat that was submitted on this month, which is now shown on the screen. What they did essentially took that existing braided out, symbolized it in such a way so that it's whole. You have that basically 15-foot easement that still resides at the rear of these lots because they originally resided in the rear of the lots when it was platted. They do meet all the bulk and area requirements, lot requirements from R1. This is essentially all are looking at this.
Discussion.
Yeah, now this is a change from this, what I got it right here. So,
Correct.
well, I think it's a change for the better, but
Yes.
You would have had undersized lots
yeah.
that were unbuildable, and before this latest change, staff was recommending literally to note on the plat that they are non-buildable, and so they essentially were going to have them serve as extensions of existing lots.
This is a lot cleaner.
And read that Miller code instead of having this idea.
I think it's a major improvement, so I'll make a motion.
Why not replat lot 4 and take that triangle piece out of the back of lot 3 with it?
That property owner is part of the application.
Okay. Mr. Cobb, can we do this? That has an easement in there that's going to have to be removed. Which
They're platting this as an old now. This would be.
is that going to have to take a council action to vacate an easement?
It's relocating.
And is there anything in it? Yes, sir. There's nothing in that easement. It was just okay.
I'm not aware of anything being in that easement.
Is that a drainage easement?
15 feet on the back of the original lots. It was probably a drainage. I don't know if it was utility, but maybe it was drainage. But that's just a requirement when they come in flat. How they're actually used, I don't know.
I'd hate to vacate it if there's something was in it.
Is there anybody from the engineering firm here to answer that question?
Hello, I'm Jason with Atlas Marler. To our acknowledgement, there is nothing in it. I could verify it with the actual engineer that built that subdivision before we get it signed off on. But to our acknowledgement, there's nothing in that easement.
Just to be clear, is this a preliminary or a final plat?
I mean, it was filed as preliminary, but normally the staff will sign off on the final plat if it doesn't change. Certain extent.
Well, that's the final.
I just want to be clear what we're being asked to approve.
This was filed on
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that procedure change is something new.
So there's a motion on the floor. Would you repeat your motion?
I think this is an improvement. I made the motion to approve.
As a preliminary plat?
Correct.
Second. We have a motion and a second.
Middleton,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Gillen,
Aye.
Martin.
Next item, number 11.
A waiver of half-street improvements along Oakdale at Lot 1.
So this had come into the plan review committee a couple weeks ago. The property is roughly 8 acres. It lies within the city of North Little Rock. Half, actually all of Kellogg Road right of way is in the city of Sherwood. So therefore, when they go, they propose to the city of Little Rock commercial redevelopment that it now comes to the city of Sherwood pasture. That is what they have roughly 1,100 feet frontage.
And furthermore, there's on that stretch of road at this time, we don't have any plans that we know of to widen Kellogg. However, that is on the master street plan, I believe, as a minor arterial, which means it, definitely can be widened in the future. And there is a dedication, I believe, of an additional 15 feet to the right of way that's included with this. So they're recognizing that the right of way does need to be dedicated, allowing for it. Now, going to the site and reviewing it, looking at it, there are large power lines, utilities there, and if we were to require half-street improvements right now, it would create an anomaly in that entire road at this time. And our procedure allows us, instead of just waiving these completely, we could waive them with the posting of a bond or some other instrument, monetary, that would last for a period of time, 5 years, maybe. At the end of that 5, if there's nothing done, it goes back to the person that or entity that posted the bond. But in the meantime, if the city does have a project to widen Kellogg Road, that those funds would be available to go in there and be used for the purpose of satisfying the requirement that they have to do the half-street improvement.
Is that your recommendation?
That's my recommendation, is that there be a bond posted, and we'll work out the details of the time frame. That'll be something I need to talk to the street committee about.
The Village East subdivision just to the north did half-street improvements when it was constructed.
I don't recall.
They're on the same side of the street.
How far up the hill is that?
Not very far. Just the other side of Mine Road. Just to the north side of Mine Road.
I think I was more concerned with the south side and where we come up to the intersection with Oakdale. Because isn't that on the other side of the intersection with Oakdale, what you're talking about? Yeah, so the Oakdale intersection does make there is a separation there.
But you're saying there's precedence in that area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that portion also in North Little Rock?
Village East, the subdivision is, yes.
Okay. All right.
Probably the same situation. You get this, Kevin, can you get the city limit boundary or something?
There.
I don't know where the boundary line is right there.
That's it.
But further north, I don't know but I know the houses of Village East are in the city limits of North Little Rock.
That's what I was just, looking at.
Some of those lot lines that you see that back up to Mine Road right there in the kind of the upper left of that, or Village East lots.
Okay.
To kind of give you how close it is.
I know there's some, we've got some asphalt overlay coming in that area. Brian, do you? Yeah, and that's to overlay it. So there's a fresh overlay coming in there. We don't have any plans for widening at this time on those areas. And that's, again, with the burden for widening the road at that point is there's a substantial amount of utility that's got to be moved.
Was that the case up north?
I don't know. I just know it's been widened. I was out there the other day.
I've just looked at some aerial on my phone, and up in that area there is not curb and gutter either. Not the full length. It's just right there, a short period of it. The full length of that subdivision is not the curb and gutter. There's no sidewalks.
Gentlemen, discussion? For the recommendation that we do require a bond for half-street improvements, there is at least some precedent for that having been done before in the area on that road.
On item 11, it says the subject is waiver of half-street improvements along Oakdale Road. But what we're saying is we are not going to waive half-street improvements. We want a bond for half-street improvements. Is that correct?
You've stated it correctly, yes. Whether we're waiving the construction of it in lieu of a bond, that works for me too.
I'm not sure I can say it again.
Well, as it is written, the waiver of half-street improvements. What I'm suggesting is what that should mean is the waiver of the construction of the half-street improvements be allowed in exchange for the bond that would accomplish that.
And you were saying 5 years on the bond?
I'm going to need to look at some other bonds and make sure on that, but I've seen them go out as long as 10 years. Mm-hmm. I just don't know. I mean, we're talking about a lot of money tied up here, and it's reasonable to have that secured. I mean, the city doesn't need to completely ignore that. Mm-hmm. But for the sake of what our short term is with our bond money that we currently have and the street improvements we've currently identified, I don't have Kellogg on that list. Do you, Brian?
It's not on there.
Right. They'll have to make their driveways, definitely, but this is for that venue, so there's no subdivision. It's just that one single event center. It's commercial. Yeah, it's just a single event center.
I move that we waive half-street improvements along Oakdale Lot 1 with a bond for 5 years.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'm just not so sure about the 5 years. May need to extend a little. Otherwise, I would second the motion without.
Gonna let Mr. Penn determine the length?
Yes, sir.
I said, do you want to let Mr. Penn determine the length?
Yes.
I mean, a minimum of 5, yes, but to whether we go on out to 10, I need to do some research on that.
Well, I do think we need to give them some certainty on that.
Oh, yes. That'll be short term.
How about something on the order of not up to 10 years
There you go.
at the city engineer's decision?
Discretion, okay. I move that we waive half-street improvements along Oakdale Road at Lot 1 with a bond for up to 10 years at the discretion of the city engineer.
40 seconds.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll. Aye.
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 Zoning amendment of parcel number 3S056000100 from R1 to R1 conditional use authorized wastewater use.
As Planning Commission Secretary stated, you have a parcel ID here. It's one large parcel, roughly 55.31 acres total area. Portion of that is proposed for a solar array by the North Little Rock Wastewater Board. There is a very large Arkansas Power and Light right-of-way that transects this property. It is technically inside. It is owned by the city of as is the piece of land off to the west. Quality, wastewater quality. Graphic on the screen is for this is the future land use map for the area. You can see that it's technically it's R1 on the land use policy for single-family detached residential next to Trimble Estates. There are some environmental constraints off to the far west side of the site, floodplain. But essentially, from a land use policy standpoint, the fact that it's a little bit constrained and that it's still being zoned R1, you do have the ability to provide a conditional use on this property, as long as it's going to be not to be used as storage or maintenance or storage yard or something that's like a large trip generator. That's we've seen that with some other facilities recently in R1 zone. So that's what they're asking. And right now you're looking at roughly 33 acres. So the solar array would almost about 33 acres of site. Still be R1 portion. Part of the parcel actually has R4 at the southern end, even though the land use map still has it as R1 portion at single family attached. So section 141013 in your schedule of uses provides for public utility building and facilities when necessary for serving the surrounding area, provided no public business office and no repair or storage are maintained therein. The report basically says that the plans don't not show storage facilities, don't show building offices, essentially array, solar panels, requisite power, help services.
I noticed on the plat they're showing here, they show, I assume these hatched area is the solar array, and I noticed that they have backed off from Trimble Estates Phase 1 about maybe 100 feet. And I think one thing we need to I think that needs to be in our decision that they keep the solar array, that they don't build a solar array right up to the property line.
Graphic that you see before you, and it's also plat, shows that there is a, not exactly sure, it's 50 feet, where the arrays end, where the property line.
Before we go any further, this requires a public hearing as there's a request for a conditional use. I'm going to open the public hearing at this time. Does anybody wish to comment on this request? If you would, give us your name and your address and sign in, please.
All right. Hello, my name is Michael Clayton. I'm with North Little Rock Wastewater, and what we got here is our 5-mile treatment plant facility that serves about half of Sherwood and a good portion of North Little Rock. It has about 10,000 customers that serve this treatment plant facility. We have a large pond. I tell you what, if you don't mind, I'm going to have just a little sketch drawing shown here that kind of help me a little bit better here. Everybody can see it here. We have a large pond facility here. Polishing pond, and two smaller ponds. Part of our treatment is 5-mile plant. This right here is in the city limits of North Little Rock. Now, back in sometime in the 90s, inflation took place, and this property here was general property transferred over to Ferguson's. I can't remember the name they used at the time, but maybe 2016 LLC or something like that. Ferguson were the ones that were doing the Trimble Estates subdivision. They sold this portion of it here out of 165 acres. City of North Little Rock wastewater for future use over there. Two goals that we had here. We were looking at expansion of our facility. It's on here. Wanted to build a mirror image of it. Also, future plan also called for another mirror image of these two ponds down here. And since then, we have decided to take a different approach. We'd like to go with what we think is a lower impact use and move towards dedicating this facility over here, this area of land here for solar arrays to do two things. One thing is we got a provider that's working with us, and I'm going to introduce Bill Halter with the Scenic Hill back there, asking questions I have, and we're trying to lower our energy cost. The cost of solar has dropped dramatically over the last 10 years, and we're trying to take advantage of some incentives that are still on the market out there. By the end of the year, they expire. So also, we like to lower the utility costs. That's our number one cost that we have at our treatment plant is electricity, and we like to try to lower those costs using solar arrays. Our biggest benefit we can accomplish that. Now, the 24 acres that we kind of got listed in here for the hatched area for the proposed solar array would have strictly the access coming off of highway Round Top Road over there. There will be no access coming off Trammell Estates or Trammell Road, anything like that. It'll strictly be coming from the south, where our primary entrance comes for our treatment plant, which is off of Jameson, I think around 57th Street over there. So 100% of our access will be coming from the south, off of Penn Hill Road on there to south down there. I'm here to answer any questions. Generally speaking, it's just a low impact development. What we have to do is clear. Obviously, we can't have shadows over the solar arrays. We have to clear those areas. It'd be minimum grading at best, and then have to erect. You can clear with L'Oreal over off of Interstate 40. You have a little solar array over there that should drive by on the interstate. It'd be something similar to that. Simply low impact development. There shouldn't be any. There's not any generators. There's not any noise that's associated with it, and strictly the height of it's about 4 feet to 8 feet, depending on the angle of the arrays towards trying to gather in the most sunshine. And at this point, I don't kind of like to leave it short and simple. But if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer. If you can't, I'm here to help.
Guess my only question is, will it literally cover that shaded area on that drawing?
The shaded area is what we've got proposed right now, and the legal description, we just want it to be authorized for the R1 conditional.
Anybody else? You'll give your name and address and sign in, please.
My name is Valda Branch. I'm a resident of Trammell Estates. I just want to ask some questions. We don't have a precedent for what solar arrays are going to be. It looks like on the plat this is going to be very few feet. So as I look out my fence of my backyard, am I going to be looking at solar array and all of the trees?
You can't. We need to move the picture up where you can see the scale. The scale is on the lower left-hand corner. And, okay, there we go. You can see 500 feet. Half of that is 250, and I guess half of that is 125 feet. So they're showing the solar array to be about 100 feet over your fence line.
So all the trees that are in that current green belt where there is power line back there right now, all of it.
You want to answer that?
Yes, I mean, how format works here. Yes, where the solar rays would go, obviously, trees would have to be removed. It has to be can't have any shadows or shade interfering with the solar.
But I think the question was on the border,
Border
buffer.
is, on the east side of there, we definitely have at least 50 feet. It's kind of fluid right now, but we don't have an exact design at this point. But right now, we've got at least 50 foot that we kind of set aside.
But can we leave part of that with some trees on it to shade the view?
The east side? Yes.
Yes.
I don't know how to read this. When we got to this last week, we signed for it. All we got was change of R1 to R1C. If I hadn't come up here to what that meant, I wouldn't have known it was right behind my house. When I purchased this house, I purchased it because of that green zone. It is a quality of life issue. It's not to say that I'm opposed to having a solar array. It's probably a very good deal. But what does it actually do for residents that this is? And I don't think any of us here have that experience. So it would be nice to know what it actually is. And I don't know if there's any other Carolyn States folks here.
Thank you.
I'm not sure how to answer what does it mean for residents. Our goal is to find a used property that low impact and it's the solar array is low impact use. Trying to be sensitive to the idea of creating a little setback of at least 50 feet. At this point, that's what we've got shown here. And we're here to work with anybody and everybody, try to answer the question. I don't know how to answer.
Some grading. So already it's wet back there. Recognize it's wet back there. Better grade that area.
There's literally very little, if any, grading, strictly clearing it, create a grassy area, and solar rays will be above grade.
Right, you mentioned 4 to 8 feet, so it's going to be above the fence line.
Well, they're angled. The bottom part of it is about 4 feet off the ground. The top part's about 8 feet in height. There's no noise factor involved in it. We do not have any 480.
How about lighting?
We'll have a fence around it for security, but as far as night watchers and light, this time we have plans.
And this is an uneducated question. What if somebody comes by there because a lot of people come back there now and shoot one of those? Is there anything going to come out and reaches the ground?
That'd be just a property damage issue that we have to deal with, like shooting a window.
So I'm just going to go through my list real quick to make sure. So is the city planning on planting any new smaller trees around that area? Or will they just do it matter because they're not in high riding shade?
And we don't have any pre-planning plans. Maybe ask Bill to answer some of these questions.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I'm taking up people's time, but as a resident, if you had something that close to your house, and you're looking at the backyard.
Over here for
You'll give your name, address, and please sign in.
Thank you very much. My name is Bill Halter. I'm the CEO of Scenic Hill Solar. We are working with North Little Rock Wastewater on this project. Unfortunately, some of you remember I was a former lieutenant governor of the state. I apologize for waking you up early in the morning. To the residents' questions, which are very good questions, I'll try to answer as many of those as I can. So, as Michael Clayton pointed out, avoiding shade on the modules is important for the production. However, with the amount of setback that we have there, it would be feasible to have either vegetation as a buffer, shorter trees as an example, or if your main concern is not looking physically at the array, we could put up a barrier or a screen, aesthetically pleasing screen. So either one of those are possible. Right. And sure. And so what we would do is simply do a shade analysis to make sure that the array was not being shaded. With the amount of setback that we're talking about, I feel pretty comfortable that we could keep some reasonable height trees there. You would still have that green. To some of your other questions, which are, again, great questions. This is an Arkansas question. What happens if somebody fires a gun at the array? No, it's a
gunfire every night.
No, it's a great question. So nothing happens in the sense of any dangerous chemicals or anything like that. All of this material is inert, it's inorganic. You'll have a small bit of broken glass that'll fall to the ground, but that is it. In terms of the functioning of the array, it has no noticeable impact. The modules themselves are 6 feet by 3 feet. They're divided into 6-inch squares. There's 72 of them. A bullet will mess up one of those 72 cells. The other 71 cells in that module just keep on going. We wouldn't even replace it. It'd just stay there. You had a couple of other questions. Sure. Yeah. Okay, great question. So there's no need from our perspective for any additional lighting there. And I'm not familiar whether there's lighting at the facility at night right now, but we would not require any additional lighting. The question of glare, actually these do not cause any glare. The whole mission of modules is to absorb as much light as possible. So you won't getting reflected light of the mission of power plant, absorb as much light as possible. You had a couple of other questions. Oh no, ma'am. No, there's no noticeable increase in air temperature. In fact, it's imperceptible. You don't need to worry about that. I think another part that we're aware of is the modules themselves are 6 feet by 3 feet, but there will be very significant spaces and rows between modules. So if you looked at it just in terms of the surface area out there, most of the surface area would be free, unobstructed, clear grass growing around. It's the modules, we mount them in such a way that they're never shaded, and that puts distance between rows. I think that most people in the industry consider the typical lifespan of a solar power plant 30. Well, the only studies I'm aware of, ma'am, are with respect to residential solar. Studies out there with respect to residential solar show that property values go up. Install a solar array on your roof, largely because of two things.
They're not.
No, I understand. What we are finding is that communities across Arkansas and across the country are making investments because they save money, burden on ratepayers. They provide price stability. They also are very forward-leaning. This is very much a 21st century technology. Why L'Oreal deployed the power plant because of the positive environmental benefits. And we're seeing this now really, as I said, across the state and across the country. There are cities in Arkansas that are our clients that have announced 100% renewable energy goals for their city operation. That's true of Clarksville. It's true of Camden and Washita County. There are other cities that we have under contract that we haven't announced publicly yet. But what I would suggest is that you're going to see more and more of this, and for particular circumstance, I think you've got the ability to benefit all of the ratepayers from North Little Rock wastewater, and it does serve folks in Sherwood as well, will benefit from lower electricity prices for utility. That'll be passed on to all the ratepayers. Excellent question. So after all the approvals, the construction time is remarkably fast. For those of you who have seen the power plant at L'Oreal in North Little Rock, you know that power plant. That was built in 49 days from construction start to generation of electricity. So these are very rapid construction.
But if you don't retain rebound,
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? You will give us your name, address, and sign in, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Terry Hardaway. I live at the address of 1436 Jameson Avenue. I was listening at the young lady talking about the solar plant. We're speaking like rain cutting down trees and all there. I live right there where those power wire lines. Built $100,000 home right there. I'm totally I'm speaking about my home being there. The wildlife. I'm taking out the trees, the grass, doing construction out there. I watched trimming put up when I first moved there. 5 houses from that whole lot out there. So it was 600, 700 homes out there, and they took away a lot of wildlife. Rabbits, squirrel, deer. There's a duck roof right back there. I'm like 5-minute walk. I'll be at that wastewater treatment plant. I'm concerned about the taking the wildlife areas. Concerned about. She had a lot of questions. I'm glad she asked those questions. What is it going to do? What about the lights? What about the energy? Those are very good. I got neighbors live there. I've been there 7 years. It's something to think about putting those solar panels. My opinion, I do want to see the cost of everything go down. But solar place coming there, disturbing the wildlife. I don't know. I ain't feeling good about this. They tried to put a road there one time. Like I said, it's taking a lot of wildlife. I'm a hunter. I hunt for everything. Everything I hunt, I kill, I eat. I'm just concerned about the wildlife now. They took a lot when they took all those houses out there to trimming. So my questions this guy here, when are they gonna start? If they would start, how long? The process will be. What about those power lines? I talked to electricity. I was getting, I forget how many voltages off of those wires. And we got solar place. 4 voltage in my area, my house right there. That's because it's coming right. I mean, the end of Pentel Road, get down to the end. My house sitting right there. That big pole sitting right there in my yard. Holds all the wires going north, all the wires going this way. That's a lot of power coming. They had to do a check for me to build a house right there. Make sure I'm not getting, I had to get approved of electricity for the house. So that's a lot of electricity coming through, along with what I got there. So I'm concerned about that. That was my questions. That was my talk about. I'm glad I showed up. My neighbors here, they told me about this. I didn't get the paper. I heard about the meeting. Lord, I better go this way. Anytime you come in home area or they dream house, and that's my dream house right there. About when I first found this place, there was animals everywhere. I said, you know what? I want to go there where they is. Now coming to serve those places. So not totally against it, but that's my dream.
Thank you. Anybody else who wishes to add something that we have not heard addressed up to this point? I'll call the public hearing to a close.
I've got a question. I've got a question for AP&L. The one thing I was on the construction of this. It appears to be a fairly flat and some trees and brush and what have you. To prepare the site, are they going to get out there with bulldozers and level it and can convert the whole entire area to dirt or what? Yes, sir. Yeah.
No, sir. The idea is that the surface will remain grass. So if you look at, in fact, if you drive past L'Oreal sometime here, you'll just see exactly what this would look like. It's a well-kept pasture, essentially, with solar module mounted on it. So we don't want to do anything that the only civil work that would be done to the residents' question would be to improve water flow. There would be nothing done that would degrade the water flow, and we would seed grass for the surface. So it's grass array.
Yeah, that's what's worried me is if you scrape the area and you had dirt, and then you put the solar array up, no grass is going to grow under the solar array. So you need to be very careful about the installation of the panels.
Yes, sir. And to that point, it's an excellent concern. If you look at the pasture at L'Oreal now where the array is, you'll see that grass does in fact grow underneath the module because it gets sunlight. It just doesn't get sunlight the whole day. There won't be any bare spots if that's your concern.
Yeah, that was my concern.
Yes, sir.
And one other question for the lady who spoke. It's about they're showing the solar array about 100 feet from your fence line, and it would seem that be very easy to put 25 or 50 foot of trees in there, or they may already be there. Mm-hmm. Yes, please. Would you be willing to leave some trees on that eastern edge?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. In fact, ma'am, I think the shade analysis, what we would do is our client would be the one working with you to figure out and make sure that there is a good amount of vegetation there to provide you the aesthetic that you want. and we would make sure, it'd be our job to make sure that the trees and the array would be positioned such that there wouldn't be shading. This is very doable. And in fact, if you look at our Clarksville facility, and I'll show you pictures of it later, there's an entire woods along the eastern side, and we've set the array back, and it all works, and it's all fine. We're very sympathetic and empathetic to the point that you're making, and this does not need to be just a completely area barren of trees. There can be vegetation there. We'll work with you to make sure that works for the neighborhood.
Well, gentlemen, we need to bring this one to some conclusion. My sense here is that this is a proposal for a conditional use. The use itself is pretty low impact. I think the primary issue that I'm hearing here is aesthetic concern. And I think as long as there is a buffer, a vegetative buffer, especially of some distance, I don't know how you deal with wildlife. It's going to go where it wants to go anyway. But I think you have to remember that this is a proposed conditional use, and we can put standards on that conditional use, and the city council may also want to put some on. Whatever those conditional uses are, they need to be reasonable and protect, to the extent that they can, adjoining property owners and still not compromise the utility. So what's your pleasure?
I move that we approve the construction of this facility and that the city of North Little Rock leave an undisturbed buffer 50 feet wide on the eastern edge, and that they improve that buffer with trees, grass, shrubbery.
Would you make that motion in the form of a recommendation to the city council to approve?
And I recommend that to the city council to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. It would be to recommend approval of the conditional use subject to a 50-foot vegetative buffer with some improvements to vegetation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Middleton,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Aye.
Item number 13.
proposed revisions to zoning code regarding conditional use of public works facilities in R1 zoning.
Kevin?
This item has come before us in a number of different ways over the last couple of months. Through the public review and approval process, staff is asking the Planning Commission to make recommendations to City Council with respect to various provisions of the zoning code. All of these revisions to the zoning code are relevant to what we're calling municipally owned public works facilities. Municipally owned being the language addition relative to what's standard use chart. Elements in this report essentially have remained unchanged since their original inception. During our last meeting on this, there was additional discussion, if you will, and that was related to support for section 1410D, which is at the top of the slide, as well as report. This has to do with a 60-day period elapsing discernible progress on implementing. It essentially has to come back for a review. That's something that can stay, but that's something that was somewhat more recent than the original language. The rest of them still do remain, and so the staff recommendations are to revise the various sections shown before you. It is on page 3 of the report. It essentially deals with section 14.2b, additional, section 14.210d, condition, 14.41d, additional use in R1 zone, and revising section 14.13, residential uses.
This is a proposed amendment to the zoning code that requires a public hearing. I'll now open the public hearing. Anybody wishing to comment on the proposed revisions to the code? You will give us your name, address, and sign in, please.
My name is Natalie Brown, 9105 Jacksonville Cato Road. So I want to start today by reading small portions of the City Council Resolution 4-2019 because I noticed that when I'm going through the staff recommendations and the proposed amendment, it's not limited to one piece of property. And in the resolution declaring the intent of the City of Sherwood to construct a new public works facility on certain property located on Jacksonville Cato Road, it states at the beginning, whereas the City of Sherwood has purchased certain land on Jacksonville Cato Road, and then lists the legal description and mentions the actual address as 9121 Jacksonville Cato Road, containing the 21.01 acres, more or less, and then goes forward and states in Section 1, the rezoning request for the property in question is hereby remanded back to the Sherwood Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission is hereby requested to establish a new zoning classification sufficient for the municipal use planned for the property as declared by this resolution, but conditional in nature, so that should the property or any part thereof cease being used for municipal purposes, it would revert back to its original R1 zoning classification. So in the proposals and the staff recommendations, I will agree that part of that intent of the City Council has been met. However, the City Council's intent stated here in the plain language of the resolution is for this piece of property to have the conditional use, not all residential pieces of property in the city to have the conditional uses for public works, and not for every piece of property to be allowed public works facilities to be built on it, so that this piece of property to be able to undergo the quote-unquote new zoning classification sufficient for the municipal use planned for the property. So as it's written in the proposal, any R1 zoning in Sherwood city limits would be allowed to have a public works facility built on it at any time. If I don't want this facility going next to me. I think you all are aware of that. I don't want this facility going. I sit here month after month waiting to speak my piece. But I also don't want to move to another piece of property, not that I plan on building or buying anywhere else again in Sherwood. But if I did move somewhere else in Sherwood, when this is said and done, I don't want the City of Sherwood to decide, hey, we want to build another public works facility elsewhere in Miller's Crossing, and me to again have to sit here month after month fighting this again. And that's the intent of the City of Sherwood City Council, in plain language, that this be for 9121 Jacksonville Cato Road, not just any R1 piece of property in the city. So the council's intent is clear here. In writing, the zoning code must be clear as well, that it be limited to one piece of property. I think that goes along with the conditional use wording as well. That 60-day waiting period. Again, if the city vacates it or doesn't make progress within 60 days initially, or then vacates it, the city could come in and then 90 days later just begin their work again, or go to another piece of property and pick up where they left off by picking another piece of property and going through that proposal process to get a new permit application and build another public works facility, or in item 140401D, item 3, which says you can't have the facilities with the administration offices. The public works facility could be at 9121 Jacksonville Cato Road with the trash trucks and whatnot, and then their facilities with the administration offices be located elsewhere. If it's not specifically with the intent of resolution number 4-2019 with 9121 Jacksonville Cato Road. So if the zoning code is not specifically written with the intent of city council. My third point is staff recommendation number 1, which states to revise section 1402.10b. It only states add sub-item I, area requirements shall adhere to the same requirements found in subsection or in section 1407.02b. What about the requirements found in C through H? For instance, light industrial allows for 35% maximum property coverage. For this piece of property alone, that's 7.35 acres of the total proposed property for a light industrial. However, for a residential property, that you can go up to 45% maximum coverage, which would be 9.45 property. So by not adding this requirement in here, the city is increasing their available building area for this property alone, that the 21.01 acres in the R1 over industrial. Additionally, the city is also decreasing their yardage requirements for themselves and allowing them to move over their buildings as well with R1 over industrial. So those requirements are found in 1407.02e and G. So the recommendation, I believe, should be simply 1402.10, not 1402.10b, and instead of limiting, I apologize, 1407.02b, taking out just the b and simply being 1407.02. Instead of just limiting itself, because B has the fencing requirements, which should be in there for an industrial, but because residential doesn't have a fencing requirement, and there should be one to protect residences, which the commission just showed in this last public hearing that there are concerns to protect residents in the city of Sherwood, correct? So if there's a protection for residents requirement, then it should also be simply found in section 1407.02, not simply 1407.02b. So again, because there's a reason 1407.02 states residential development is excluded from this district, both to protect residents and to facilitate maximum efficiency of industrial activity. It's there to protect residents. This is not a low impact concern. You must protect residents. This is going to be hard to change once implemented. So before putting it in language, in hard language, it needs to be thought out. It has been thoroughly thought out. It's been here. I've been here month after month. I've watched that process. I know it's going to happen. I'm not saying that. I just want to make sure that it's thought out a little bit more. And for instance, taking out that B and just making it the entirety requirement of industrial, because that's what the original thought was going to be, was the industrial requirement, and going with all the requirements of industrial there. But again, also with the intent of the city council, which was to limit it to this particular property and not the entirety of Sherwood, but so that when someone else has to go through this again, they do the same thing that I'm having to do and come back here and make sure that they are well aware of what is going in next to them, and that the city is doing what residents have to do and make their case to put in something, just like a commercial building has to do to go from R1 to C, whatever, or R1 to industrial, whatever. But make sure that the city has to go through the same requirements that every other person has to do and be held to the same standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to this issue? Call the public hearing closed. Discussion. Kevin?
I was listening to discussion that was just had, and the report speaks for itself. The intent for the city council and their resolution to come back to the planning commission is rooted in knowing that the land was purchased, rooted in the fact that they know they need to have additional space for their existing facility, and it's rooted in the idea that they are very much aware that an expenditure of public tax dollars has already been paid, that they do need the expansion. They also are aware that they need to have a replacement for the existing facility, which is in the industrial zone. They know that the uses that are in that existing facility also will require the same level of intensity, same level of oversight that an industrial zone would otherwise have. However, because the zoning is R1, there need to be some more restrictions. That is why the report reads them. That is why you have multiple sections that we've gone through that try to treat this as a conditional use, not change the underlying zoning. From a planning perspective, we felt that changing the underlying zoning would do more harm in terms of serving a precedent, maybe negatively so, say. But land use plan doesn't ask for a wide array of classification. However, this is why that is why the report reads.
I guess in partial reaction to that, I agree, the city council gave us a charge for a specific piece of property. We could either rezone that property to industrial, which is unacceptable to everybody, including the council, and they also gave us the charge that, by George, you put it in such a fashion that if it doesn't happen, it stays R1, because the general zoning classification is what's important. And our charge, and my sense of it, was to provide a mechanism that would legally accomplish this purpose without changing the zoning to something more rigorous, which was industrial. So the question is, do we believe that what has been drafted here accomplishes the purposes that the council set for us?
I say make a motion, we send this to council for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call the roll. Aye.
Bruno?
Aye.
Philip?
Aye.
Aye.
Go to the council. Item 14.
In the last couple of months, we've looked at accessory building setbacks. In particular, the idea that staff would like to have a little bit more administrative oversight into what they feel is a way for them to manage the intent of the regulations with respect to light, air, safety, privacy, and all the other things that zoning plays in. We had gone ahead and looked at this at the last meeting, and there were several changes that the council or that the planning committee had asked we make to the last iteration. We deleted the section limited to 25 foot width length. We did remove that. And we also worded the third item here, the accessory building has no loft windows or doors. Windows or doors specifically facing either side of the reduced setback. This report, the discussion at the last meeting, staff at tonight, we feel that this language does achieve what we've all wanted to achieve over the last couple of months. Staff is considered by the board.
This calls for a public hearing as we are proposing to amend the zoning code. Does anybody wish to speak to this? I call the public hearing closed.
There was one lead-in sentence, and I do know that this was a point of discussion at the last meeting. We did not put this necessarily in the report. You'll see here that the pagination is a little different. Item E required setbacks. There's sub-pagination going from 1, setback shall be governed by the following chart, and 2, permitted exception. there was some discussion about reiterating this first sentence. The setback shall be governed by the following chart to read, except as otherwise required for particular zoning districts, all accessory building structures, all residential districts shall comply with the following requirements. Basically, re-emphasize this has to do residential zones. This has to do residential districts only. The leeway that the staff would have in that context only, under the exception. So I bring that up more for discussion. It's not formally articulated.
My sense was that this whole section of the code should be about accessory buildings in residential, period, so that there's no chance for confusion. But it also occurred to me, in looking at the standards on individual zoning districts, that there's at least one residential district that has a criteria that's different than this. So the question then becomes, well, which one do you comply with? And the answer is, in my mind, you comply with the individual district requirement, which supersedes these more general requirements. And if there is no specific requirement, you go with these. And just to avoid any potential confusion, I think it'd be a good idea to add a sentence, that sentence or one like it, that says, in the event of a conflict, one of them overrules.
Yeah. Well, in the event of a conflict, the more restrictive rules, wouldn't you say?
I don't know about restrictive, more prescriptive.
Yeah.
When you have more specificity, that's where you go.
Yeah.
When there's direct articulation of what to do.
Because what we don't need, what the staff sure doesn't need, is for some sharp person to come in and say, well, it says this here and this there. Let's do it the way I want to do it. You may not believe this, but people do that.
So there's discussion about report or perhaps or possible.
Well, over and above what you've seen, there's only two suggested revisions to that language. And the one is to change the heading of the subject to accessory buildings in residential zones. And the other is that the sentence is showing there. Can we have a motion or a discussion anyway?
All right, I'll go ahead and make the motion to adopt this and send it to council with the addition of that was in your.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Middleton.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
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 So in the report, you're under the consideration before the Planning Commission approval of revisions to two sections, 1441B and 1442. Those are sub-items under the R1 and R2 zoning respectively. If you go through those particular zones, each one of them have square footage minimums. Compliance with state legislation, Act 446. So as you can see, proposed revisions to the Sherwood zoning code to bring it into compliance with that act essentially says to delete the second sentence for 1 under the R1 district, B for permitted uses that removes 1,000 square foot minimum heated or cooled space requirement, and then delete the following in 1442 for multifamily residential districts R2. Sub-item B uses strike sub-item 4, minimum heated or cooled space shall be 100 for all permitted uses. Striking.
As this is an amendment to the code, this requires a public hearing. Call the public hearing open. Does anybody wish to speak to this? Seeing an abundance of non-interest, I call the public hearing closed. And this is essentially simply to get it into compliance with state law. That's all it is. I'd accept discussion or a motion.
Motion we send this to city council for their approval.
Second.
I have a motion in 2 seconds.
Middleton,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Item 16.
Wholesale regulations.
This has been around the block for some time. The truth of the matter is that a proposal that we made to the city council last year, in fact, was tabled, partly because there was some discussion about there was going to be some language put in the General Assembly's next session, and the council had some reservations about what we could or could not legally do. In the meantime, we've been kind of sitting on it, not really sure which way to go, but when that legislation passed, it fundamentally mirrored the FCC requirements on small cell deployment with a few twists. But one thing that apparently is clear is that any city that did not have a regulation in place, especially for placement of these facilities in public right-of-way, may not be able to pass any regulation in the future. So we have been asked simply as a planning commission to look at this, to make any correct suggestions or observations about whether we think this is a good idea or not, and to pass that on to the city council. This is not the normal kind of thing that the planning commission would do, because it doesn't involve zoning or master street plan or comprehensive plan or something like that. But it is something that we have been asked to weigh in on. Richard, would you like to give us an overview?
Certainly. This summer in the Arkansas Municipal League conference, there was a presentation that highlighted the part that is, I think, the most important for us. If we want to regulate, we need to have something in place by September 1st. If we do not have something in place by September 1st, that does not mean we cannot regulate. It does mean that if we choose to regulate and it is challenged and some portion of it is found non-complying or illegal, then the entirety of what we've proposed is discarded. If we have something in place before September 1 and it is challenged, only the portion that is found delinquent or not legal, invalid, thank you, is removed, and the remainder of the ordinance or the regulation stays in place. As is, I think, good policy for any of us when we're looking at things like this, when we can borrow something from someone else that's done a lot of homework and we think that this is in a good form when we get it, I think that's the right thing to do. So we did that, and we have changed City of Bentonville to City of Sherwood, I believe, in every place. This is 11 pages long. It is an attachment, and the title of the attachment, and this would be an attachment to the ordinance. The attachment is Standards for Small Cell Wireless Facility Placement in Public Right-of-Way. So it is a very limited regulation to begin with. We're only talking about public rights of way, and those would not be the state highway. Those are the state highways. They already have those regulated. These would be public rights of way in the city of Sherwood. And the placement of it has to do with the actual physical location in the right of way. It has to do with separations between cells. Section 2, the purpose and scope for regulating small cell wireless facilities. The purpose of this ordinance is to provide policies and procedures for the placement of small cell wireless facilities in rights of way within the jurisdiction of the city of Sherwood, Arkansas, which will provide a public benefit consistent with the preservation of the integrity, safe usage, and visual qualities of the city rights of way and the city as a whole. It is the intent of this ordinance to establish uniform standards to address issues presented by small wireless facilities, including but not limited to. And there are several listed here, but part of those are the color, the material of construction, the height to some extent, And that's about it. So we can take this that has already been produced by another city. I don't know if it's been challenged or defended.
I don't think
Okay, but it is a body of work that appears to me to be pretty comprehensive. And if we have something in place, we can change it. If we don't have it in place by September 1, we forfeit the opportunity to retain everything other than the part that's wrong.
I'd like to be allowed to take this on and get it on the agenda.
One change in the version that I had, page 6 of 11.
Yes.
The paragraph that begins with F.
Yes. Yep.
Second, Bentonville Electric.
Right.
That's the only. Other than that,
I actually did get that corrected in the previous version, and I did not bring the right one, so I apologize for that. And that F does refer to the electric utility. We don't have an electric utility. Correct. However, by striking the approved by the Bentonville Electric Utility Department, taking that out, we still would retain some ability to control on others, such as First Electric or someone like that.
Yeah, First Electric Energy and Florida.
Right. Okay.
Well, naturally, I have a couple of comments. First, one thing I like about this draft is that not only does it speak to placement of these things in city right-of-way, it says, and if you're putting it on private property, you will abide by the setbacks of the zone it's in. Well, I like that. Second thing is that this requires a final decision by the city within 45 days. The FCC rule and state law both provide 60 or 90-day review. And my only question, basically, of you and the staff is 45 going to be enough, especially given that they can batch applications. I think it was up to 10 that they could put in a single application. I don't know what the volume's going to be, but I'm only asking if 45 days is enough, given that both state and federal law give you more. Something to think about.
It is, yeah, thank you.
And the second is, there's one section that was just a little bit confusing. I'm going to read it because section 3E4A says it refers to a 60-day review period, which I'm assuming includes the 30 days after, and this is after an application has been denied, that you've got 60 days to review it after it's been denied, which is strange because you had 45 in the first place. But what's not clear to me is that I assume it means the 30 days after the application denial, and that the applicant has to resubmit plus the 30 days that the city has to review the revised information. It would make more sense to me if the language said the city had 30 days to make a decision after resubmission, period. I'll throw that out for you to think about before it goes to council or at discussion.
Yeah, and what I'm reading in this, just to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, under that number 4, beginning at the beginning of part 4, notwithstanding the initial denial, the applicant may cure any deficiencies identified by the city within 30 days of the denial without paying an additional application fee, provided that the city does all the others. So I know it's directed at whether or not we're going to charge them again. But without the charging them again, yeah, on A, it's got if the city fails to act within 60 days. So we've got 60 there. So one more time what you were saying. I know it is, I agree, it is confusing. It took me several times reading it to.
I wasn't 100% sure what that 60 days applied to. It sounded like you got 30 days to review it, plus 30, where's that other 30 coming from? It just wasn't clear to me.
Yeah. Well, I certainly share your opinion of not being clear. It was difficult to read.
Other than that, it's pretty good ordinance.
I have one question. So, section 7E3, accessory facilities. Toward the end of that paragraph, cables shall travel along the exterior of a non-tower support structure. My question is why?
Where were you again, please?
7E3.
Is that page 11?
Yes, page 11, halfway down.
I think I've got something different.
I think I may have something different than you do.
No, mine reads that way too.
7.
7,
E. Yeah, page 11.
E3.
Accessory facilities.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Last
okay.
sentence.
I think where that's headed is that the cable shall travel along the exterior of the structure rather than being an aerial, so that it's actually, exposed. It's not supposed to be bridging from one part to another part. It should actually be tucked away. It's not interior to the structure, but it's against the structure.
Radio-wise, why wouldn't you put it protected interior of the structure?
I don't.
If possible, if you're trying to keep the rest of it as filthy as possible.
Good question.
I think that should just be struck.
That's a non-power structure or non-tower structure.
Yeah. Like let's say a church steeple.
Yeah.
I suppose that would just have to do with whether or not the cables are required to go inside something that was never. I mean, does it? Maybe it can't for that.
I don't know why, ever.
Well, like a solid wood pole, if there happens to be one there for some other reason.
That makes sense. But here it's specifying that it has to be on the exterior. Now, if it's a hollow pole or if it's a church steeple, they use that run up the inside.
Yeah, the word "shall" does limit it, but to have it as
what harm would be done if you took that sentence out?
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know that there would be any.
And as you said, this can always be amended.
If we got it in place by September 1, we're in good shape. Yeah.
Do we wish to pass on a recommendation to the council?
I think we do. I'll make that.
Second.
Is that as presented with striking that one sentence?
Yes.
Thank you. Agreed.
We have a first and a second. Call the roll.
Middleton?
Aye.
Bruno?
Aye.
Dillon?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Item 17.
A preliminary plat of 9324 Motor 7 Quality Engineering Survey.
Okay, this is a 3.0 acre parcel. It's encompassed by 4 individual parcel identification numbers. This is at the corner of Maryland Avenue and Highway 107 on the southeast quadrant. See in the graphic. There are 2 lots that would be created for 4 parcels. Proposed lot 1A at 0.731 acres and proposed lot 1 at 2.349 acres. Subject property information area. There are existing buildings on the site. They're all to be removed. See in the shaded light pink, that would be proposed lot 1A with the haloed orange, each color. Lot 1 at 2.349 acres. Applicant is proposing to consolidate the 4 parcels into 2 parcels. More than 2 parcels are shown, whereas the southern 2 parcels are shown in proposed lot 1. Purpose of the preliminary plat, ready the land for eventual development. There have been feedback from the applicant's engineer addressing outstanding items that staff had. Many of them are just details with respect to flood zone delineation, setbacks. We ask that they delete for 25 feet property abuts residential district applicable. And on the improvement survey itself, please label the acreages. Not only legal, but it's actually on the acreage. Packet as well as on your screens. Revised final preliminary plat that's it for our report.
Richard, comments?
I think we've been over this one pretty well. We've reviewed it in our GIS system. We also supplied East Maryland right-of-way information to the engineers to be sure that they are not required to do any street widening. And for that matter, there's a very short distance that technically they should be required to do, and I think it's only order of 20 feet or something, but it's such a small amount, and the way that it lays in there, we've got a plan now. And for them to try to do something is, I think, ill-advised. So I think that we just leave it alone as it is, because they've got it, they have it shown, they have the benefit of East Maryland already being widened at the intersection. And it's just a very small piece right there where it blends into the existing narrow width that's going to be widened, but we've already got that in plans. I didn't see any other issues. We've checked it.
Gentlemen, do you have any questions or concerns? Can I get a motion?
I move we approve the preliminary plat of 9324 Highway 107.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Middleton.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Aye.
Item 18.
I move we approve the final plat of 9324 Highway 107 Quality Engineering and Surveying. Oh, I'm sorry.
Way to jump the gun, Lucian.
I'll second his jumping the gun.
Well, I would kind of like to hear if there's any staff concerns or comments.
Not at this time, sir.
We have a motion and a second.
Middleton.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Gillum.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye. Item 19, old business. The next meeting of the Vision Plan 2040 committee is 16th. Supposedly, that's going to be like a final representation of the draft prepared by James Walden for our future consideration, although the committee could meet again if there was a substantial discussion. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I asked James yesterday if there's anything additional presentation of the final draft. He said that policy changes necessary for additional public outreach.
We did have a discussion at the last Vision Committee meeting about what the actual boundaries were of historic Sherwood. And we concluded that they weren't exactly the way he had them drawn on the plan, which, by the way, is on our website linked to the plan. You ought to look at it if you haven't. We've gotten the legal description of the incorporation papers for the city, and presumably that will be the one changed in the plan. I mean, that could lead to a historic designation. It could lead to signage. I think it could lead to different zoning requirements for that area, but we all thought it was important not to identify precisely. Is there any new business? Could I get a motion?
Move we adjourn.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Call roll.
Middleton.
Aye.
Aye.
Gillum.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye. We will now call to order the meeting of the Sherwood Board of Zoning Adjustment, June 11th meeting. You've received, we get a roll call.
Middleton.
Here.
Bruno.
Here.
Gillum.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
See, I'm doing better. You've received the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any recommendations, suggestions, corrections?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Aye.
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 Is there any other business? Motion?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Roll?
Middleton.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.